Hi, Jon Puleston.
Hi.
Nice to see you. How are you doing?
All right. Yes. Good. Yeah.
So it's great to see you again. And how's it been so far the last 2 days?
Well, I've literally just arrived, so I can't bother. So yeah, flying this morning, so I can't really pass comment. But it looks like a nice looking space. It's very sort of modern.
Yeah.
It feels modern, this place.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we just had a quick chat before this, and you mentioned you got some insights on using humor in research. Can you
Yeah.
well, a few jokes on that?
I was yeah. Well, I was talking at the Queries conference last week about this. Humour is a sort of massively underutilised weapon in market research, in my mind, and undervalued sort of element. I did this wonderful piece of research where I asked respondents to imagine they'd be the personality of the last person who wrote the survey. The last survey they did, imagine what that person's like, and ask them to draw a pen portrait of their personality, and then ask them to think about the personality of one of their friends. And I compared the two, and I'm afraid, the average market researcher is seen as being a little bit dull and earnest and serious, and we read that in the way that we write surveys. They're really quite dry and serious, often very pedantic, and I think that we end up mirroring that in the way that we answer surveys, and so you tend to get these very dry answers from people that you don't necessarily believe. I ask you, for example, if you're going to vote, and one of the things I asked about, what do you think? Do you think market researchers will vote? And they all think that market researchers vote. And so I say to you, yes, I voted in the last election.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas that not everyone did.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we call it acquiescence bias, but I think it's partly people just being polite to us. They think that we're like this particular character, and therefore they respond in kind, in a serious sort of way. If you ask people what they watch on television, they say that they watch the news and documentaries more than they actually do, because they assume that that's probably what we do. So I found that just adding a touch of humour can really address that issue. Like we did quite a serious project where we're asking people to tell us about whether they vaccinated their pets and the impact the economic crisis was having on that. We couldn't get anyone to admit that they didn't vaccinate their pets, because obviously you don't want to admit that you don't care about your pet. So we just changed the tone, and we showed people a picture of this woman going like this, with it's sort of like expressing a lot. And the headline was, "When was the last time you cleaned your oven?" Which is a bit of a trivial little thing to get so alarmed by, but it basically got the message across that we're all a bit human. And then we asked them about lots of simple little things like when was the last time you checked the pressure on your car tire? And we changes the phrasing from yes and no to, oh, that reminds me I need to do it, and so made it a little bit easier for people to answer no. And then when we asked people, have you vaccinated your pet, we had 40% of people saying, oh, that reminds me I need to do that. And so that just brings out humanity in people. And I've got loads of examples like that, of just making surveys a bit more fun and interesting can allow people to give more human responses. So yeah,
that's actually quite excellent, because I haven't really seen anything like that. But so would you say a level of empathy is necessary for some humor?
That was not necessarily, humor's not the only solution, but yeah, empathy. So the whole ethos of survey design is trying to think about the human psychology, the human involved in answering that question, and trying to understand what their barriers to telling you a truthful answer. It might be embarrassment. It might be a degree of pride. I mean, for example, 80% of people think they're better than average at their job. It's sort of, I can't see that I'm not. And so you have to, it's only by understanding that you can then start to think about how to reframe a question to try and find out something you need to know. And so I'm really interested in that, sort of almost like the behavioural science of taking a survey, the human experience of that, and as soon as you start thinking about it from the perspective of the person doing it, you have a way of rethinking what the survey experience could be like to be more interesting. One of the biggest problems, really almost the biggest problem with surveys, what we're talking about for so many years, is that people just get plain bored answering your repetitive loop of agree-disagree statements about your brand, and no one's particularly interested in
Just waiting for the percentage filler to fill up and
the
then
next button.
get my Amazon gift card. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, how do you tackle that? And so, I've done a lot of work on the gamification surveys to turn things into more like a game-like experience, to make people, that instead of saying, what brands come to mind, which I can't be bothered to think of anything, I might play a game to get people to guess the brand. And, that's a bit more interesting when you can get a win or lose out of that process. And trying to think of ways to just make the whole experience more interesting for people by adding a narrative structure to this, adding more purpose to a question. If I know why I need to know, you need to know the answer, I'm maybe more open to giving a more thoughtful answer. So, and then how you strike up a conversation with people, how you get them interested in doing something in the first place. That's really been my lifelong fixation as a survey designer, trying to tackle those sorts of problems. Well, I'm talking about that today, really.
Yeah. Can you expand on the keynote?
Today I'm talking about bad data and the sources on it, and I think there are myriad of sources of bad data, anything from a bad panelist to a bad survey to a bad bit of analysis, and asking a bad brief, and often it's not bad data or bad analysis, it's not thinking about something, and I'm trying to explore the avenues for bad data, and I'm looking back in the history of market research and some really bad bits of market research that have happened over the last century. There's been some really humdinger, bad mistake that the industry's made, and I want to sort of celebrate them, celebrate the learnings that we had from those sort of moments. For example, back in 1936, one of the American highbrow literary review magazines did a poll of its readers to predict who was going to win the election. And they literally interviewed 2.5 million people. So that it was like a massive poll from a statistical point of view. But it was so miles out from reality, because they hadn't taken into account that the people that read that literary magazine are more educated, and they have a completely different perspective to the other X million people who don't. That led directly apparently to the development of quota and random sampling techniques. So realising how important those things were. That massively headline grabbing mistake caused, enacted real change in how people thought about doing proper large-scale bits of market research. And those are the sorts of things, I think, that trying to understand mistakes is something I'm really interested in, trying to get to the heart of why something is not right, why an answer's not right, and trying to, why you reach the wrong conclusion. I'm really interested in really trying to think out around a problem, and any form of data analytics process is often a really complicated problem you're trying to solve, trying to work out, am I actually seeing real data here? What are the patterns in this data? I think one of the common things that we do is chase these correlations. The average researcher sees a great big watch of data, and the first thing they do is look for relationships. But so often, a good analogy is a market researcher is given a brief by a bread company to tell them what's the secret of making bread. And they go away, do this research, and they spot the statistical relationship between salt and people liking the bread. So they go back, right, we solve the problem with salt. So the manufacturer goes and making the next loaf of bread, pours a whole load of salt into their bread, and he gives it out to the market. Well, this tastes disgusting.
I can see it.
We tend to stop at the relationship bit, not thinking about how many grains of salt you need to add, and realizing that nearly all relationships are non-linear. nearly all. You know, how, you know, we try to see these straight lines all the time, where in reality there's so much interplay, there's catalytic effects of one factor or another. It's all really complicated sometimes, some of the relationships we're trying to unpick. And that's one of the biggest mistakes I see in data analytics, is the sort of essentially regression analysis got a lot to answer for, because it's so simple, and it's when you see a relationship, it's really exciting and it's clear. But a lot of the time, those relationships are invisible because they're like U-shaped. You know, for example, if you ask the average political opinion of someone in Saudi Arabia and someone in the US, they're almost identical. And so until you look at the shape, in Saudi Arabia, everyone's in the middle politically. They're all one that hedge their bets and have any strong opinions. They're very narrow in their political perspective. Whereas in America, it's U-shaped. You've got a whole load of right wing, whole load of left wing. Well, on average, they're in the middle. So if you just took a correlate, they look the same, but they're completely different, because it's sort of we're really bad at spotting U's and M's and W type, you know, sort of like non-linear shapes in data, because it's very difficult to actually do. So I'm talking about all that sort of stuff today.
That's, I think you've given away the entire keynote there.
Well, I think it's not going out until after the event.
No, definitely not. No, but I do appreciate it.
No.
Thank you for coming.
Okay.
And obviously we'll be seeing you at Congress.
Yeah.
And we've got some of the demographics content coming up soon, I believe.
Yeah.
So
that's a really great initiative, yeah.
Absolutely. So if you wanted to see more of that, that's available on our website. And what's the next one we've got working on? That's the working set. It just came out.
We're working status. We're now working on how to measure income effectively, which is a really quite difficult one.
Yeah. That's well, good luck with it. I'm looking forward to seeing it. No, pleasure to meet you. And enjoy the keynote.
Okay.
No, thanks.